Part 170. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1691. After thinking about it, the queen said, "You go and choose a group of children who are of the right age and smarter and send them to the imperial physician's office, and let them all take the test. If they pass the test, they will be good candidates in the future, and they will be released. Books, everything follows the rules of the imperial physician's office." Aunt Chang paused for a while after hearing the words, and asked in a low voice, "Then the list of people to be released from the palace was selected before?" "Let's leave it as usual," the queen said. "In the past few years, there have been no new people in the palace. Instead, a few children have gone to the clan. Now the fifth is about to get married and leave the palace to open the palace. I think the imperial physician's office I can't choose a few people to go to, so I just need to be tight everywhere." Aunt Chang smiled and said, "The lady is kind and kind. Really kind. This is the third time that an older palace maid has been released since the queen became the queen. Without the grace of the empress, the palace maid would not be able to leave the palace for the rest of her life, and the old aunt, except for a few masters, basically would not have a good ending. And there are so many maids in the palace, they are all getting old, and why are old maids rarely seen in the palace? Because most don't live to old age. Why are eunuchs and palace maids so keen to accept godsons and goddaughters? What I want is that in the future, they will be able to have someone to take care of them after they are old and infirm to serve their masters. It won't be sent to a place like the Huanyi Bureau or the Cold Palace to work as a coolie, but if it is sent, the apprentices and godsons and goddaughters they bring out will save some work if they take care of them. Out of the food and medicine. Yes, that's all they want." Even if Aunt Chang was the queen's side, she also had an apprentice, and it was also for anti-aging. Therefore, it is already a great favor for the queen to let the older palace maids take their savings out of the palace for many years. Even if life outside the palace is hard, but with the savings in the palace and one or two other things on the body, you can always spend your old age in peace, which is better than in the palace. If you are not very old, under the age of 40, maybe you can find a widower to marry, and bring each other's sons and grandchildren together. Maybe you will have a support in your later years. Zhou Man's proposal gave the people in the palace more thoughts. Of course, Man Bao didn't know anything at this time. She just felt that if the number of female disciples in the imperial physician department was not full, she would be too embarrassed and it would be very unfavorable for the next enrollment, so she thought that she must recruit enough students. But I don't know how much sensation this proposal caused in the palace, especially among the maids. Many palace maids who have passed the age of 18 and are already unqualified cry secretly, regretting that they were born early. The older one thought more openly, and then said to a group of young ladies who had been in the palace for many years, "You are lucky, if you can enter the imperial physician's office. It is impossible for us to meet in the future, we have to. I'll call you adults." A little palace maid asked in a low voice, "Is it the same as seeing Lord Zhou Xiao?" "It depends on your ability. If you have the medical skills of Lord Zhou Xiao, of course it is the same." Everyone raised their ambitions. As a result, there were many little palace ladies who signed up for the monk's aunt. Although they were young, they were not stupid. Knowing that this was one of the few opportunities to leave the palace openly and have a bright future, they naturally had to take advantage of it. The palace was signing up, and Zhou Liru also listened to his sister-in-law's words and went to sign up, and for the past 2 days, he has been carrying the medical book by me. For this reason, Zhou Lijun also took care of her 3 meals a day, just like serving as an ancestor. Zhou Lixiu looked stunned and puzzled. "Isn't there a little ant here?" Zhou Liru held the book in one hand and the steamed bun in the other, and looked at it while eating, and said without raising his head, "Little Aunt Tate said, she can't let me go through the back door. Many doctors in the hospital are staring at her." She sighed. "Senior brother and third senior brother are over the age, so they both took the places won by my sister-in-law, and the requirements for me may be stricter, so I have to do better than others. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to enter the physical therapy department. The physical therapy department has the most stringent requirements. It is the only one that requires students to be literate, and it is best to have some basic medical science subjects. The school system is 8 years. My aunt said that if I can't get into the physical therapy department this year, I won't be admitted to the Imperial Physician's office first, and I'll take the exam next year. Zhou Lixiu asked the crow's mouth, "What if I don't pass the exam next year?" Zhou Liru still didn't respond. Zhou Lijun first stretched out his hand and patted him, and then smiled with Zhou Liru, "Don't listen to your third brother's nonsense." Zhou Lixiu said, "I have a reasonable doubt, and always consider the worst outcome." Zhou Liru said, "My aunt said that if I don't pass the exam next year, I'll take the acupuncture exam. I will definitely be able to get into acupuncture. I will study acupuncture for a year or two, and then think about transferring to physical therapy." Zhou Ligu said, "Third sister, if you pass the exam, don't you have to work in the medical department for 15 years? Zhou Liru said confidently, "I've made up my mind. In the future, I will also be admitted to the Imperial College Hospital and become an official in the palace." Now it's Zhou Lijun who asked, "What if I don't pass the exam?" "Then go back to the medical office in Lujiang County. It will be close to home by then, which is not bad. When you think about it, it's true. Anyway, you have money to get it, so learning the craft will not be useless." So everyone was happy and stopped worrying about it. But at this time, Manager Zheng was also talking to Zheng Gu about this. "Don't worry about the 15-year period, I have discussed it with your uncle, and when you finish your studies, even if you can't enter the Imperial Physician's office, then you can enter the capital for 2 years. The county medical office, or other medical offices in Jiangyi is also good." Zheng Gu asked, "What about the family's business?" "Silly boy, there are other rooms in the family. In our Kiwang family, medical skills and connections are the most important things. If you have good medical skills, the clan will not dare to treat us badly in this room. You can see from your uncle," he said, "although your 2 cousins are still young, they can already see that they have no talent, but as long as your uncle is here, your father and I can still talk in the pharmacy. I can talk, our family, you and your uncle's family won't suffer. The shopkeeper Zhengda has already planned carefully. You are the most determined among your brothers, and you are also the most talented, so you will concentrate on studying medicine with your master in the future, and I will take you after the new year. The 2 cousins take them with them to study, and in the future, the business in this shop will be handed over to them as much as possible." Zheng Gu understood that in their generation, he was his uncle's current position, and his 2 cousins were his father's current position. He was used to this kind of thing, and bowed his head. The shopkeeper Zheng sighed, "It's your marriage that I'm very worried about, but it's a pity that Li Ru is too young." Zheng Gu widened his eyes and shouted, "Dad, what do you think? Little junior sister is so young." "Yeah, so what do you think of her sister?" Zhengda said, "If you can have a kiss with your master, then your admission to the Taiyuan hospital will be a little more stable." Zheng Gu tried hard to think about it. He didn't remember Zhou Lijun's appearance very much anymore, he only remembered her crackling words, which were very neat. He immediately shook his head. "No, Dad, we are not suitable. I still prefer gentle women." Shopkeeper Zhengda looked at him with hatred. "Can you be more promising? Isn't she just stronger? What are you afraid of?" Zheng Gu shook his head again and again. He felt that he was more nervous about Zhou Lijun than he was with his master. It was only suitable for business with her, right? Shopkeeper Zhengda felt a lot of pity. He really felt that Zhou Lijun was good. Not only could he get closer to Zhou Man, but the other party's ability was not bad, but... Looking at his son's cowardly look, thinking about how warm he is in his work on weekdays, I really told him about Zhou Lejun. He also shook a bit. Forget it, he can't really let his future daughter-in-law press his son, right? Discordant temperament, what to do in the future. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1692. Xiao Yuanzheng is not very concerned about whether the female disciples are accepted enough. Originally, all the men in the imperial physician's office except Zhou Man were male, so naturally it would be better to teach male students. The female students are not enough, so it is better to replace them all with male students. Originally, he felt that the ratio of 8:2 was the best. But the queen opened her mouth, the prince also indulged, and even Lord Yang helped Zhou Man to say a few words, and he agreed to the ratio of 7:3. The registration time was about to close, and he never thought that the palace would send more than 70 little palace maids for reference. The female official who sent them over smiled and said, "My lord said, as long as they pass the examination of the imperial physician's office, they will be released, and they will be members of the imperial physician's office in the future, so Xiao Yuanzheng can rest assured that the palace will not interfere." Xiao Yuanzheng guessed that this was what Zhou Man did, so he could only force a smile and accept it. After accepting the person, he turned around and ran to find Zhou Man to settle the account. Zhou Man didn't think he was wrong, after all, it's the first year to recruit students. What if the number of recruits is not enough? Xiao Yuanzheng twitched his lips and said, "Do you still think we don't recruit enough people? Have you ever thought about how many imperial physicians there are in the imperial hospital? Everyone has to work in the imperial hospital and go to the imperial physician's office on weekdays. Do you know how tiring you are in so many classes? This is not a year, we will recruit students next year, and the year after." Man Bao said, "If you don't have enough, you will recruit people." It's not what you said. Usually, the doctors in the Thai hospital are too busy and have no hope of advancing. Is this inevitable? How good is it now? Everyone is busy, I still get a double salary. Although there is no job field to be a doctor in the imperial physician's office, there is a salary, and there are quite a few. Xiao Yuan was choked for a moment and asked, "When did I say this? Why didn't you say that, when your majesty's fever persisted, I heard you and imperial physician Lu whispering." Xiao Yuanzheng, you have really good ears. Man Bao, I just slept on the wooden couch next to me, but I just didn't die. Xiao Yuanzheng waved his hand with a headache, "Okay, the exam will be taken later, you are not allowed to give me water." Man Bao assured, "You can rest assured that I will not release water after my invigilation. Since you want to study medicine, it is natural to be suitable. After all, the number of years is not short. If you recruit someone who is not suitable, it will not only harm others, but also harm their imperial physician office, right? The exam is divided into subjects, and there are many types. Those in the physical therapy department must be literate, so on the first day, they have to take a written test, not only to write, but also to test some very basic medical theory, such as you see a person with red cheeks and eyes on the road. His eyes are red, what do you think his problem is? Such a general knowledge test. Although it is a general knowledge test, there are still many people who can't answer it. Man Bao can't understand it very well, but Imperial Dr. Lu is accustomed to it. When the sticks are put together, the two don't even know. Man Bao said, "But they are literate." Dr. Lu shook his head and smiled without saying a word. Because of this, Zhou Liru's grades in it are not bad. After all, she has also learned medical theory for a long time, and basically recognizes all herbs. Of course, she is as good as she is, and there are basically a lot of people who have passed the customs. Most of them are from Zinglan's family and have been in contact with medicine before. Man Bao corrected the paper and found that Zhou Liru was ranked in the 30th, but out of the 20th, and in front of her, there were two little girls who were better than her. This requires literacy and a written test. Those who do not need literacy and written test will be tested by the gentlemen one by one. Of course, 5 gentlemen will sit on the top each time, and one person will enter. The gentlemen take turns asking questions and answering questions, and then according to their answers, score, and finally combine the scores before admission. The imperial physicians were very down to earth. They took some herbal medicines that can be seen everywhere in the countryside and asked the people who came in whether they recognized what kind of herbs they were, had they used them before, and how. Or ask, have you ever been ill before, have you seen a doctor, what kind of disease has you suffered, and do you still remember how it was treated? Or, some doctors start directly and ask him what acupuncture point is called, whether there is any pain, and what to do if there is pain. Manbao gave people a lot of puzzles, such as a cow's tail on fire, what should you do? Not to mention the candidates, even the examiners didn't know what to do. When the students went out, they turned their heads and asked Manbao, what's the answer to this question? Manbao shook his head, there is no answer, I just asked, wondering what they would do. Xiao Yuanzheng and others. In addition, the most popular question for imperial physicians is the number of techniques. For example, Chuangshen 1 tail and 28 texts, a patient needs to buy Chuangshen 8 tails, how much does it cost in total? Questions like these almost drive literate and illiterate candidates insane. The exam lasted for a total of 5 days. There was no way. Many candidates were illiterate and could only take face-to-face exams instead of written exams. I have seen them one by one, naturally it is relatively slow. Basically, those with medical foundations come to physical therapy, acupuncture, and SORS, and the competition is really fierce. As for other departments, most of them have zero foundation, and they can only choose to look more clever and suitable. Of people elected. For example, massage requires a relatively strong hand. In the last class of 20 students, only 2 girls were selected. To the surprise of Xiao Yuanzheng and others, most of the little palace maids from the palace took the acupuncture exam. It was Manbao who persuaded them that they could not choose so many people for acupuncture, so they spread out to choose other subjects. This is not to kill each other. For 5 days in a row, Manbao was about to be exhausted and paralyzed. He talked too much. After returning home, he took out some dried chrysanthemums and soaked them in water to drink. Mingda and Chang Yu secretly ran to the East Palace to play with her, then sat cross-legged on her bed and talked to her. I heard from the little palace maid who returned to the palace, you asked a lot of people, if you see a person fall into the water, what are you going to do? As a result, many people answered that they could not be saved, and you were not hired. The answer to jumping into the water to save you was not hired. How did you choose? Manbao held a teacup and drank chrysanthemum water, and said, this is not a problem for me, but a lot of problems. I also asked them if they knew how to use water, and if they had ever been in water. Wouldn't it make trouble if they jumped into the water and saved people? A life was lost in vain. If you don't save people, you can call them. Look around to see if there is a stick. You can also try it if you put a stick and pull it up. Chang Yu was puzzled, what does these questions have to do with being a doctor? I feel that the questions you are asking are all messed up. I heard that Xiao Yuanzheng also asked people, if you don't eat for 3 days, a pot of meat and a pot of vegetables will be placed in front of you, do you choose to eat meat or vegetables? Manbao said, a doctor must have a benevolent heart, turn around and leave. If you don't save it, it's not acceptable. See you at 4 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1693. The doctor also needs to have the ability to protect himself. He knows he can't do it, but he still needs to do it. Not benevolent, but not smart. Man Bao paused and said, I want to exchange one life for another, but both lives are lost. Meteor, inadvisable. Then what is the title of Xiao Yuan Zheng? That's also two questions. If you don't see oil and water in your belly for a long time, you can't eat big fish and meat all at once, it will hurt your stomach. People who don't know choose meat can be forgiven, and people who know choose meat are greedy. It is not advisable to place greed above health and life. Mingda seemed to understand, and asked, so, if the answer is meat eating, some people will be admitted, and some people won't. Man Bayadao, it depends on the situation. If there are people who answer better than them, the number of people admitted will naturally not be recorded again. If there are not enough, then the short one should choose the tall one. Because it was the first enrollment, the people who came for reference were uneven. There were young doctors who had been studying medicine for several years, medicine boys who knew some common medical knowledge, and even Yu Fang Langzhong brought his nephews and nephews. But there are more people who can recognize some characters in the capital and its vicinity, as well as those who do not know how to read. They just heard that the Department of Imperial Physician does not say anything about their studies, but they also provide food and clothing. They will come to take the exam if they can become officials in the future. Mingda asked, so are you recruiting enough people now? Man Bao shook his head, except for massage and cursing, there are still a few people in other classes, so it's really impossible to pick out the right ones. Xiao Yuan is saying that it is better to be short than to waste. It is better to be short than to waste. Minda nodded. The number of places in the imperial physician's office was not full, so some people asked the empress to ask if they could let their distant niece and the like go into study for a or two, but it was not included in the quota of the imperial physician's office. Saying that she is a distant niece is just a rhetoric, most of which are given to the eldest servant girl in the family. The emperor only pays for the imperial physician's office, and he seldom cares about these matters recently. He didn't think much about it, and smiled directly, is there a shortage of doctors in Iking's family? There is no shortage of doctors, but there is a shortage of female doctors. Although he didn't quite understand why his wife and daughter had to let him raise a female doctor, but if the wife was making a fuss every now and then, let's talk to the emperor. The emperor didn't take it to heart, and after making fun of it, he said, this matter is handled by the queen and the crown prince. Instead of asking me, you might as well ask the queen. The ministers who pleaded for mercy were so happy and relaxed, so they let their wives go into the palace to find the queen. They are all appointed, and they are all qualified to enter the palace. So within 2 days, the queen could only summon Man Bao in private. How many places are there in the imperial physician's office? Man Bayadao, there are still 2 people in the physical therapy department, one in acupuncture, one for children, and one for sores. The queen nodded slightly and said, some of the wives of the family have begged me to come, and they want to put the family's distant niece in the imperial physician's office to learn a thing or two. Man Bao knew what was going on as soon as he heard it, and frowned. The queen asked with a smile, why, you don't want to? Seeing that Man Bao still didn't speak, the queen smiled and asked, I heard people say that it seems that someone has begged you before, but you rejected it? Why, do you have any opinion on these noble families and powerful ladies? Man Bao shook his head, I have no problem with them, and I can understand them, but Niang, we said before that the imperial physician's office is for the training and delivery of doctors in the local medical offices, and the medical office is for the people of the world. The queen nodded and said with a smile, that's right, it's still the same today, isn't it that you're not fully recruited? Niang, if we agree to send people to the imperial physician's office before we are full this year, will the imperial physician's office be even more dissatisfied next year? Year after year, we can recruit fewer and fewer students. If you don't come a few, will the rest of the places be given to them? The queen listened, and the smile on her face slowly disappeared. Aunt Chang on the side looked at Zhou Man in astonishment. Man Baidao, people are like this, as long as they have interests, they will find ways to make things develop in their own favorable direction. Now we look at a trivial matter, but it may cause the imperial physician's office in the future. The bane of collapse. She said with a serious face, so since the rules have been set from the beginning, they cannot be changed. It has been agreed that there will be 300 places per year, and if you are not satisfied with the recruitment, you will be dissatisfied, but any students who are recruited within these 300 places will be recruited in the future. All have to be assigned to the medical office. After thinking for a while, the Queen asked, "Can this medical office let down so many people in the future?" Man Bao said earnestly, "When you can't let go, there is a way to let it go. It's fine for the imperial court to issue a decree at that time, or for the yamen to coordinate with each other, so that these doctors who have learned medical skills can survive on their own, but now until we see the abundance of doctors." The Queen held her forehead and said, "It's right to obey the rules, but this palace can't save face. Sigh, I used a soft attitude before, but this time I rejected someone." Seeing the Queen's sorrow, Man Bao couldn't bear to follow her sorrow. She thought for a while and said, "No matter if the Empress's 300 places are full or unsatisfactory, they cannot be given to them, and beyond the 300 places, they will be given more. Make 10 places with them." The Queen raised her eyebrows. "You mean, set up 10 places for them?" Man Bao nodded, "Yes, let them pay, we will teach them at Tai Hospital." Thinking that the Emperor's private treasury is almost finished now, and the Ministry of Household has to delay every time he gives money, Xiao Yuanzheng and Yang Shuexiang ask you to come and fight every time, and she is caught in the middle. Very difficult. Especially recently, Xiao Yuanzheng also liked to let her go to send a message to Yang Shuexiang, which made it even more difficult for her. It's just that the imperial physician's office is short of money to buy some textbooks. When I come back, Xiao Yuan and I are negotiating a price. You can let them send people. For these 10 places, we will let them be the same as other students. Take classes together, learn the same skills, and after you finish your studies, you can come and go with them, and you will never stop them." Man Bao paused for a while and then rolled his eyes. "We don't even need to take the exam, we will teach it as long as it is sent, but whether you can learn it depends on each person's talent. 10 places are given to them every year, and there will be no more." The Queen was stunned for a moment, then nodded after a while and said, "This method is not bad, but how is this quota determined?" Man Bao narrowed his eyes and said, "The maiden has decided on her own." After thinking about it for a while, she said embarrassedly, Niang, I don't know if the people from the Li family in Yangzhou are looking for you. If they do, why don't you leave a spot for their family?" Queen. Aunt Chang. The Queen couldn't help laughing out loud and asked, "Do you want to go back and discuss with Xiao Yuanzheng first?" After thinking about it, Man Bao nodded. Although she was very confident that she could persuade Xiao Yuanzheng, it was better to go back and discuss it, and the price had to be fixed. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1694. Man Bao ran back to Chongguen Museum. Xiao Yuanzheng and the others were checking the list. Seeing that Zhou Man was so leisurely, he couldn't help but ask her with a stern face, "Dr. Zhou, have you finished the list?" "It's done." Man Bao turned out the list she had written and showed them to them. Crowd, "It's so fast, obviously it's the same workload." Man Bao pressed the list on the table, dragged a chair and sat next to Xiao Yuanzheng, who was busy, and smiled at him with his face supported. Xiao Yuanzheng felt a chill in his heart. He was writing, but he turned his back halfway to avoid her gaze. Man Bao said diligently, "Xiao Yuanzheng, do you want me to write it for you?" Xiao Yuanzheng originally wanted to pass his work to her, but when he saw her like this, He immediately shook his head, saying that he could do it without her help. Man Bao was also disappointed. She looked up and saw that everyone was looking at her intentionally or unintentionally. She felt that this was not the place to talk, so she asked Xiao Yuanzhang, why don't we go out and talk? Xiao Yuanzhang said with a serious and fair face, if you have something to say here, we have nothing to say to others. Having said that, things haven't been decided yet. I don't want too many people to listen. Man Bao lowered his voice and whispered, I just came back from the Empress. Xiao Yuanzheng really wanted to keep his integrity, but he really wanted to know what Zhou Man was doing to the queen again. After struggling for a while, he put down the pen with a sigh, got up and went out with her. Therefore, having a subordinate who is the same age as his youngest daughter and eldest granddaughter is really not a good thing, especially the subordinate is very popular with his immediate boss, and many things can be negotiated with his immediate boss, which is even more annoying. He followed Man Bao outside, sighed and asked, tell me, what's the matter? Man Bao told Xiao Yuanzheng everything that the queen had discussed with her, and she said, isn't it not approved by the Department of Medicine list that we listed earlier? Xiao Yuanzheng, they feel that it is a waste of money to use such expensive medicines for students teaching. Even if I said that these medicines can be used repeatedly for teaching, they would not agree to buy them. Man Bao, so our Imperial Physician's Office has to have a small treasury of our own, so that we can buy the slips that are not approved by the Ministry of Household. Xiao Yuan's brows moved, you mean to get money from those adults' homes? Man Bao nodded, they want private doctors, so we can train them, just give them money. Xiao Yuanzheng frowned and said, in this way, isn't the skill passed down? Oh, how long is this? Do you still think that your skills will not be passed on? Man Bao said, don't forget, there are doctors from Fanbang in the Imperial Physician Office. After they finish their studies, they will return to their own countries and tribe. Are you afraid that those people sent by noble families will learn medicine? Xiao Yuanzheng thought about it as well. It's obvious that he can't stop it. Man Bao was still talking, I think Mr. is right. You just care too much about your housekeeping skills. Like me, I don't care. Xiao Yuanzheng lifted his eyelids to look at her, and let out an almost inaudible snort. Man Bao didn't realize it, and continued, it's like people in ancient times who were angry. The first person knew the benefits of fire. If he hides it and doesn't tell anyone, and knows it alone, what's the use? He can only wait for the fire to come and save the fire, but he told others, and after many people knew, when the fire went out one day, someone came up with a way to drill wood to make fire. Xiao Yuanzheng didn't understand what Zhou Man was saying at all, so he could only stare blankly at her mouth opening and closing. If the person who came up with the idea of drilling wood to make fire, hid it and didn't tell others, then he may only have this method in his entire life, and once he dies, no one will know this method, and it will take many years for a second person to figure out this method. But he told others that this method can be passed down, and then the next person will discover flint and fire at some time, and it is with the ancestors one after another that we only have flint and fire that can start fire at any time. Excerpts. Man Bao finally finished the foreshadowing, and then gave the results. So this medicine is the same, we can teach each other and teach powerful disciples, and they don't have to think about studying the former all the time in the future. One can also think about studying the heights that we have not reached, one by one generation after another, and there will always be more powerful medical skills than we have now. This is what she came up with after briefly studying the history of medicine with Mr. Mo recently. She was once puzzled before, why Mr. Mo and their medical skills in that era were so powerful. In the past, she only learned the development history and evolution history of ancient Chinese medicine. This was the first time she came into contact with the development history of the whole medicine. Only then did she know that these people were still too narrow-minded. The narrow-minded Xiao Yuan couldn't understand Man Bao's words, and asked in confusion, What kind of fire in the sky? What kind of fire is made by drilling wood? Man Bao, haven't you read the history books? Legend has it that the first time ancient humans learned to use fire was because of the sky fire. Xiao Yuanzheng, I'm not a historian. Why should I, a physician, study such ancient history? And which history book is this written in? Why haven't I heard of it? Man Bao scratched his head. Did she mix up the history books produced by the encyclopedia and the history books of this world? She absolutely won't admit it. Man Bao said, I don't remember, but there is anyway. No, this is not a problem. Shouldn't you think about whether what I said makes sense? Xiao Yuanzheng waved his hand directly. Okay, we are talking about collecting money, it has nothing to do with this. You said that you want to give 10 places to those noble families and dignitaries. Well, Man Bao can only cooperate to change the subject and think about the most important thing at the moment. She nodded and said, yes, all the money earned is put into the imperial physician's office. Xiao Yuanzheng asked, how do you get this money? Man Bao and him stared at him with big eyes. Man Bao was inexperienced, and Xiao Yuanzheng certainly didn't. The two of them stared at each other for a while, and then Man Bao said loudly, 100 taels per year. Xiao Yuanzheng, are you dreaming? Who is willing to spend so much money to train a servant? Man Bao, then how much did you say? Xiao Yuanzheng stroked his beard and said, half, 50 taels. That's not a lot, you can buy a lot of medicinal materials. Man Bao frowned and said, how many years did you study? In 8 years, 400 taels would be enough for a family of 5 to live a prosperous life, which seems to be quite a lot. Xiao Yuanzheng is also thinking, what they want is a female doctor, they should want to specialize in women's diseases, and then you will mostly teach, so how many years do you want to teach? Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1695. Man Bao immediately said, I definitely can't do it alone. Xiao Yuanzheng, patients may be embarrassed when facing male doctors, but why should female disciples who study medicine be embarrassed? You can teach with confidence. One of my teachers said, physicians are genderless. Xiao Yuanzheng glanced at her without speaking, turned around and left. Man Bao immediately chased after him, we haven't discussed a decision yet, why did you leave? It's already been decided. The price is not as much as we said. Now let's discuss it first. I'll go to see the Empress tomorrow and discuss this matter. Man Bao followed behind his ass and said, Xiao Yuanzheng, let's discuss one more thing. Xiao Yuan was stopping, what else is there? Man Bao sighed and said, can this quota be reserved for the Li family in Yangzhou? Oh, it was the Li family from Yangzhou who wanted to go through your back door. Man Bao, it's not good for people to be too stupid, and it's not good to be too smart. Xiao Yuanzheng knew what to do, he waved his hand and said, I don't care, anyway, the money is the same, who should you give it to? So he walked away with his hands behind his back. Man Bao scratched his head and felt that it was okay for her to go back to Chongquen Museum. He wanted to turn around and go back to the house. After walking about 10 steps, Xiao Yuan, remembering something, turned around and stopped her, aren't you going to help me? Exactly, I have to go to Lord Yang to discuss this matter, you go back and help me write out the list. Man Bao. Xiao Yuanzheng really walked away with his hands behind his back, but he couldn't help but think back to what Zhou Man said about the fire. The truth is somewhat reasonable. But how many people in this world can figure it out? Man Bao passively took over the job and could only go back to the Chongquen Museum in silence. Xiao Yuanzheng and Man Bao were inexperienced and could not understand the thoughts of those adults, but Yang and Shu could. He is an aristocratic family, and he just thought about paying the Taiyuan hospital to train a female doctor for his family, and said, you can report 100 taels. If they don't want to, they will naturally lower the price. Xiao Yuanzheng didn't expect that Yang Heshu would dare to bid more than them. In other words, in 102 years, the noble family can really give up so much money. Even if you get into a better academy, the maximum 1-year beam repair is around 50 taels. In general academies, the beam repairs are around 50 taels, right? They are an imperial physician's office studying medicine, how can they charge such a high fee? That is of course impossible. The next day, Xiao Yuanzheng only opened a mouth, without the adults from the previous dynasty, the madams who came to greet the queen and sprayed it back. 100 taels a year, when they are taken advantage of. The ladies looked at each other and cut them in half. In 52 years, your imperial physician's office is calling for such a high price to make money from them? Xiao Yuanzheng was not a vegetarian either. At first, his face was red and his ears were flushed. Later, he was unable to speak, and slowly calmed down. Then he thought about it, and immediately said, "Several ladies, according to what the lower official knows, every time the mansion invites Imperial Dr. Zhou to come to the door, the fee for each consultation is not less than 5 taels, and this year, 100 taels seems to be more than 5 taels, the apportionment is not much. The doctor raised will be the private doctor of the government in the future. There will be several decades in 5 or 8 years. But the noble ladies are not stupid, and in front of the Empress, and Xiao Yuan are calculating this account, we are not just using people without paying money, even if this female doctor is only used at home, the monthly offerings are quite a lot, not to mention that their medical skills may not catch up with last week's imperial doctor. That is, after 5 or 8 years, how far will the female doctors you teach be able to keep up with last week's imperial doctor? They wanted to keep a female doctor at home for convenience, but if they were seriously ill, they had to ask the imperial doctor in the imperial hospital to go there. See. Therefore, it is impossible for the imperial physician's office to take them as a scapegoat. Of course, they have all begged the queen, and they naturally won't let it go so easily. So everyone went back and forth to bargain, and the ladies began to care about how to teach this course and what you plan to teach. Xiao Yuanzheng said directly, 1 more place is added to each class, and the students of the imperial physician's office can learn whatever they want. Xiao Yuan was afraid that they still didn't understand, so he said, we must first learn Meiju, Materia Medica, Mingtang and plain questions, and then study their special courses after finishing these 4 books. Several noble ladies looked at each other, and Mrs. Zhao Qiuagong glanced at the queen and said, no, this way, they will learn different things. Xiao Yuanzheng said, although the special courses are different, many medical skills are common, and the price is also different. The noble ladies who have been bargaining said, do we look like people who are short of money? Xiao Yuanzheng. And what we learn in this way may not be what we want. I think it's better to let them form a separate class and invite a group of gentlemen to teach, and 10 places are too few. That's right, it's not good if it's given to someone and not given to someone else. If you want me to say, it's better to just come up with 30 or 40 places. Sir, Imperial Physician Zhou is a must. She has always been considerate, and she definitely knows what to teach female doctors. By the way, Imperial Dr. Zhou, why didn't she come? When Xiao Yuanzheng got to the back, he couldn't talk at all, and Mrs. Zhao Qiuagong also laughed with the queen, Miss, why don't you ask Zhou Imperial Doctor to ask, what can she teach those girls, who is the distant niece in the family, how many in the family? Some are concerned about their future. Mainly, there are a lot of things that can't be said to Xiao Yuanzhen's old face, and he doesn't have too many concerns about Zhou Man. As a female doctor, it is naturally the best to communicate with a female doctor. Xiao Yuanzheng. The queen was also entangled in a way, and the main thing was she could see it. The ladies had concerns and it was difficult to say something, and Xiao Yuan didn't dare to say something clearly. This was not what the queen wanted, so she nodded slightly to Xiao Yuanzheng, and said to him, Xiao Yuanzheng, let Imperial Dr. Zhou come over. Xiao Yuanzheng could only retreat, because he was afraid that Zhou Man would be trapped by the noble ladies in the house. He did not want to let the palace maid call someone alone, but walked back to Changguan Pavilion with the palace maid, and after finding Man Bao, let the palace maid step back, and walk with Man Bao and whisper, remember, in terms of quota, I can make them into one class at most, and there will be no more. Man Bao, 20 people. Xiao Yuan nodded and said, think about it for yourself, acupuncture must be in charge of you, and the female doctors they sent in must also be in charge of you. This is a matter of no choice. Calculate how much time you have. Man Bao was shocked and immediately said, don't worry, I must not have too many people. Xiao Yuanzheng was satisfied and said, I still have money. I originally thought that 50 taels a year would be enough, but they are too difficult to deal with. You can raise the price to me. If it is lower than 60 taels a year, don't come back to see me. Man Bao. Xiao Yuanzheng was still a little indignant. Also, the dormitory didn't set them up in the first place. If they want to live in, they have to pay extra money. Anyway, if they pester you with the quota, you will pester them with money, don't bother them. Seeing that they are all wives, they are very hard on money. Man Bao. Man Bao was still a little dazed when she stepped into the hall. As soon as she entered the door, she first bowed to the queen in a confused manner. After hearing the queen's waver, she stood up, and turned her head to meet the loving smiling faces of several ladies, most of whom were familiar. She has seen all of them, and many of them have been sick. Good night. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1696. Facing Zhou Man, it is easy to say a lot of things that are hard to say. Besides, there are several old ladies here who have gotten along with Man Bao and asked her to come to the house for consultation. The mother of the crown princess, Mrs. Pai Kuagong, reached out and waved to Man Bao, and said with a smile, I haven't seen Mrs. Zhou for a while, and she has grown a lot taller. Man Bao's eyes suddenly lit up, his back straightened, and he asked with a smile, really? Mrs. Pai Kuagong smiled and nodded, of course it is true. If you don't believe me, ask Mrs. Zhao Kuagong. Last time, Mrs. Zhao Kuagong had chest tightness and uncomfortable, and she also invited Man Bao to see a doctor, so the two of them were familiar with each other. Mrs. Zhao Kuagong smiled and nodded, indicating that it was true. Man Bao was happy and not too restrained, and asked these noble ladies softly, if you have any doubts about the admissions of the imperial physician's office, you can ask her. The people who can find the queen are not ordinary people. Mrs. Zhao Kuagong is the queen's direct sister-in-law, and Mrs. Pai Kuagong is the mother of the crown princess. In addition, there is Mrs. Li, the Minister of Personnel, who represents the entire Li family, and Shuguo Gong. Madame Kui, Madame Wang, and Madame Lu, who stayed in the capital. It was either a powerful person or an aristocratic family. Most of Man Bao had met him. Even if he had never seen a doctor, he had also seen it at the 100 Days banquet of Han Wuniang's son. He didn't know him well, but Man Bao could be regarded as an unforgettable memory, so he naturally remembered them. The queen gave Zhou Man a seat, as if to allow them to communicate well. The seat was specially placed opposite them. Man Bao glanced at the position, then quietly glanced at the queen, nodded slightly after receiving her encouragement, and then stepped forward and sat down. The ladies opened their mouths to ask questions, but the queen sitting in the seat suddenly raised a teacup and smiled at Man Bao. The ladies have a lot of questions to ask. You don't have to go to the Crown Princess and Prince Gong's place this afternoon, it's better to answer the ladies' questions first. Manbao bent down slightly. The ladies who were about to complain that Xiao Yuanzhen's price was too high changed their minds, swallowed and asked, Miss Zhou, we just told Xiao Yuanzheng that the people who were sent to the imperial physician's office at home are different. The things to be learned are also different from those of ordinary doctors. There is really no need to take classes with other people, it is better to form a separate class and be taught by Zhou Xiaoniang. Manbao smiled and declined. All medical skills must be learned from the most basic, all medicines are common, and the medical skills of other imperial doctors in the Taiyuan hospital are no less than mine. It is impossible for me to lead the whole class, but I am responsible for just a class or two. Manbao looked at the queen and said, although I wait for the imperial physician to teach in the imperial physician's office, the work in the imperial hospital should not be abandoned. The ladies looked at each other, and Mrs. Zhao Qiuagong also picked up the teacup and drank tea. Mrs. Pai Qiuagong could only ask, then I don't know what medical skills the imperial physician office plans to teach them. What they care most about is whether the medical skills they want can be taught to them. Manbao has been in the capital for a year and a half, and he has been in and out of the back house a lot knowing what they are most related to. He counts them with his fingers. Even if I teach them alone, pulse technique, materia medica, Mingtang and Suwen, the four most basic medical books, also need to be learned. If they are literate, they can finish it in 1.5 to 2 years. In the third year, the imperial physician's office can teach them common ailments in children and women. She paused and said, I know that you ladies want to support private doctors, so that the family will be more convenient in the future, but the family's life is very complicated, and the things they need to learn must be more complicated than other subjects. If they are proficient, then they will be taught according to the physical therapy department, which will take about 8 years. The ladies were reluctant to hear it. It was too long. In their opinion, 3 years was long enough. Manbao saw what they were thinking, and said, the 3-year course is just to learn the basics. It may not be as knowledgeable as the medical girls in the palace. Manbao glanced at their faces, lowered his voice and said, they have to learn all kinds of problems such as rashes on women's bodies, pregnancy preparation, miscarriage protection and delivery, and postpartum uterine bleeding, even some common diseases of children, as well as wind cold, wind heat, stroke, etc. They not only need to learn diagnosis and medicine, but also learn acupuncture and massage, which are targeted, and they will not be fully learned without more than 5 years. Mrs. Li immediately said, that's 5 years. The other ladies pondered for a while and said, 5 years is fine, but 8 years is too long. Manbao breathed a sigh of relief. A few ladies euphemistically expressed their wishes. They felt that it would be okay to teach less about children and other diseases, mainly gynecological diseases. Especially in acupuncture, they all felt the benefits of Zhou Man's acupuncture. When other people in the family are sick, whether it is male owners or children, they can ask a doctor or imperial doctor to come to the house for a diagnosis, and the family can spend money to support a doctor at home. Even now, when there are many people in their family, who doesn't have a doctor in their family? It's just that it's hard to find female doctors. Women, especially the daughters in the family, feel uncomfortable, especially if there is something on the body, or where the pain is. Because they are ashamed to say it, they often ask their mammy to get the medicine. Not symptomatic, there are also repeated. Or because the effect of the drug is not very good, it is always a bit unsatisfactory anyway. But it was different when there was a female doctor in the family. They were all women, and there were many things to say. It was convenient to ask a doctor for acupuncture. Not to mention, in addition to the girls in the family, there are daughters-in-law and granddaughter-in-laws, who will have no problems when they become biological children. Everyone looks good and happy on weekdays, but in private, where they are uncomfortable, it is estimated that only themselves and the girls around them know. Mostly by boiling. This is true of women from powerful and powerful families, not to mention women from ordinary people's families outside. Didn't her mother always hold back so many problems when she was young? Later, I went to see the doctor when I was too sick to move, and then I took a pair of medicine for nearly 10 years. Man Bao retracted his mind and quickly calculated in his mind the courses they needed to take. After a while, he nodded and said, "I'll go back and discuss with Xiao Yuan, it should be fine. Anyway, they have money, the courses can be more flexible." The ladies were satisfied and complained in a low voice. There are many questions that are difficult to ask the doctor outside, not only because of embarrassment, but also because if the doctor outside is not strict, it will be bad for the reputation of the girl in the family. Man Bao expressed his understanding. After talking about the most important content, the next thing is to talk about money. Because the previous communication was good, the ladies were not as tough on Man Bao as they were on Xiao Yuanzheng, but they also expressed the idea that the price of the imperial physician's office was too high. See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1697. Man Bao sighed and said, "Ma'am, we only have 36 people in the Thai hospital, and even Xiao Yuanzheng has to teach a class, and there are many more courses to teach, and this is only the first year, and there will be more next year. Recruiting new students, you don't think that this class is only one class, but at least 4 gentlemen are needed to teach them. Regardless of the energy spent by the imperial physicians, the imperial court and His Majesty have spent a lot to set up the imperial physician office. Those who go to private doctors are different from the disciples who want to go to various places in the medical department." Man Bao didn't say it thoroughly, but the meaning was very clear. What you want to support is a private doctor. Are you embarrassed to dig up the walls of the court and His Majesty? The queen in the seat also sighed. In order to build the imperial physician's office, all the money in His Majesty's private treasury has been spent. That's why Chang Yu's marriage was postponed for 2 years. Ladies, isn't it because Zhou Man said that it is not good for a woman to get married too early, and then the emperor felt sorry for his daughter and specially postponed it? Have you changed your words today at the last 2 palace banquets? But no one will point out this point without ignorance. Even if the queen said it herself, even if they thought it was expensive, they wouldn't argue about these tens of taels of silver. So they looked at each other and responded, 100 taels is 100 taels, but you can leave us a little more for this quota. Man Bao said, then double it, 10 places will become 20 places. Seeing that they seemed reluctant, Man Bao immediately explained, this small class can always take care of students in class, no matter how much more, Mr. has limited energy, and there will always be places that cannot be taken care of. When everyone heard this, they could not help but respond. After talking about the serious business, Mrs. Sukuagong stretched out her hand and took Man Bao's hand with a smile. Little Lady Zhou, if you have time, go to my house and sit down. I know it's a joy, and I want to invite you to show her. Now that she has hired a doctor, she doesn't need to see it again, right? However, after thinking about it, Man Bao nodded. After sending off Mrs. Sukuagong and others, Man Bao glanced at Mrs. Zhao Kuagong, who was left behind, and bowed back. Xiao Yuanzheng, who had been staying in the side hall waiting for news, saw it, and immediately came out, leaned over and asked in a low voice, "How is it?" Man Bao nodded at him and whispered, 100 taels a year, 20 places, they should be accepted. Xiao Yuanzheng was stunned for a moment and asked, "How did you tell them, and why did you respond?" Man Bao said, "I didn't say anything, I just talked about the difficulties of the imperial physician's office, and the empress is still here. They can't dig your majesty's walls, right?" Xiao Yuanzheng, then why are you embarrassed when you're facing him? He raised his head and glanced at Zhou Man, then cleared his throat and said, "This is also your good luck. If the adults in the hall come to talk about it, you will have to calculate every one of them, and it will not be so refreshing. Man Bao nodded in agreement. Men are stingy and not at all cool. Xiao Yuan Zheng. It always feels like something is wrong with this. Xiao Yuan Zheng, the people they sent will be taught individually. I will list a course later. You and the imperial physicians will discuss it. Xiao Yuan Zheng was immediately distracted. He nodded and said, okay, you list the courses first. After giving me the list tomorrow, I will go to Imperial Dr. Lu and them to discuss. This is even settled. When Man Bao returned to the Chongquen Museum, he began to draw out a pen and paper to list the courses they were going to learn. The initial courses are all set, and she needs to list the latter ones, but knowing what kind of doctor they want, it is not difficult to list the courses again. After all, the Imperial College Hospital has spent 4 months setting the curriculum of the entire Imperial College Medical Department. Basically, it is enough to pick out the courses that they must learn from those courses, and there are also some courses that are more related. After school, Bai Shan, who came over, saw that she was still working hard to write, so he leaned over to take a look, and asked, "Why are you still writing the course? Isn't this thing already set?" Man Bao explained to him while writing, and said, "I think this is a matter of mutual benefit. 2,000 taels is a lot of money." Bai Shan asked with a smile, "Is your Majesty still short of this money?" "Do you know what accumulating is?" Man Bao said, "I don't know how to save in this place, I don't know how to save money in that place, and everyone doesn't know how to be frugal. Even if your Majesty has gold and silver mountains, it's not enough. Not to mention the Ministry of Household, since I know the Ministry of Household and the Treasury, I have never heard any official say that the Treasury is abundant and the money is not enough every year." 20 taels of silver were listed on the list, but the household department was crossed out, saying that 1 medicine cabinet is enough. Where do you need to? Man Bao shook his head and said, "It's hard to be stingy. If our Imperial Physician's office has money, do we still need to apply for it with the Ministry of Housing when we buy a medicine cabinet? Just buy it directly, and you can buy 10 pairs at a time. Buy channel, use 5 pairs to lose 5 pairs." Man Bao was also happy, nodded and said, "That's right." And Mrs. Zhao Qiagong walked up to the queen after everyone left, and asked the queen in a warm voice, "Niang Niang, is your Majesty's private treasury really empty?" The queen smiled and said, "Your Majesty is also for the people's livelihood." Mrs. Zhao Qiagong said, "Then you can't spend all your money on the outside. After all, it's your private house, and you should keep some for yourself and your children." She said, "Princess Changjiao is not too young after all, even if it is delayed, it is time to talk about kissing in the next 2 years, not to mention that the 5th prince is going to leave the palace to open the mansion, and he has to go to the fief to become a vassal. Why don't you need money for one item?" Of course, the prince's palace was built by the Ministry of Housing at the expense of the Ministry of Industry, but what could be in the just-built mansion? In the end, don't you have to have the emperor and the queen to subsidize it? Even if concubine Yang Gui will prepare for her son, the emperor will also give it. The empress, even if it is just for face, she will pay some money, not to mention that the queen is not bad to the 5th prince, that is a lot more. Mrs. Zhao Qiagong couldn't help worrying about the queen, and asked in a low voice, "Do you want me and the Qiagong to send some money in?" "Don't," the queen stopped her and said with a smile, "it's not easy for my sister-in-law to bring her family along, and it's not so difficult even in the palace, don't worry." Mrs. Zhao Qiagong sighed, "I heard that Niang Niang has laid off a group of palace maids, and Chiener sent another group of palace maids to the Imperial Physician's office. It is said that the palace is difficult." The queen didn't expect such words to come out, so she couldn't help saying, "It's just that the Imperial Physician's office couldn't recruit suitable girls outside, so I chose someone from the palace to be the top." Seeing Mrs. Zhao Qiagong's expression of disbelief, the queen paused and changed the subject, why is my sister-in-law thinking about going to the imperial physician's office just like them? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1698. Mrs. Zhao Qiagong was silent for a while, and then she whispered, "The old lady's little girl is only 7 years old. Recently, her chest has been hurting so badly. We felt like there was a lump. It's good to go out to ask a doctor, so I can only report the name of a girl and grab some medicine and take it back, but the effect is mediocre." She sighed. "It's not a big problem to listen to those doctors, but we elders are always worried, so it's convenient to think that there is still a female doctor at home." The queen remembered Mingda, who was getting healthier and better, and couldn't help but nodded. Mingda's health was always bad before, and she had the same old problems as her, especially when the catkins flew over in the spring. She felt uncomfortable. In the palace, the imperial doctor was called in time, but sometimes when it got serious, a rash would appear on the hidden parts of her body, and it was a little bit worse for the imperial doctor to diagnose and treat only by describing it. But since Zhou Man entered the palace, in the spring, as long as the catkins are far away, Mingda will no longer have too many problems. This year, the number of times that Mingda's palace has called the imperial doctor on his own initiative can be counted in a slap. The queen understood them, sighed in her heart and said, "I will let Zhou Man go to the house tomorrow to see the child." Mrs. Zhao Qiagong originally wanted to wait for Zhou Man to rest before inviting someone to come to the door. When she heard that the queen was going to let someone go out to see the doctor tomorrow, she quickly knelt down gratefully and thanked her little granddaughter. The queen stretched out her hand to support her and said with a smile, "Sister-in-law and I are too out of touch, this should have been told to me earlier." The imperial physicians in the imperial hospital occasionally received orders such as going to see the ministers or their family members. Therefore, it is quite rare for Man Bao to receive the order. Early in the morning, she handed the class schedule written yesterday to Xiao Yuan Zheng, and she went out of the palace with the medicine box. Rong Si drove her by car, and when he was about to leave the palace, he happened to meet Zheng Gu and the three who wanted to go into the palace for needles. Man Bao thought about it, stopped them, and ordered the Dr. Lu, "You go with me to the doctor." Hearing this, Dr. Lu immediately picked up her medicine box and climbed into the carriage. Zheng Gu and Xiao Xiao could only watch them go away enviously. Zheng Gu said, "So it's good to be a woman." Zheng Xiao, elder brother, "I still like to be a man." Zheng Gu glanced at him and said, "I didn't even say that I wanted to be a woman. Let's go." It just so happened that there are not many lists reported today. Without her, we can assign more patients. Zheng Xiao, second senior sister, is not here, those palace maids probably won't let us get needles. Zheng Gu, it's okay, we can rob all the servants. The last time Dr. Lu saw Man Bao was the day before yesterday. The three brothers and sisters took turns to ask questions. One had only 2/4 of an hour, and the time was very tight. Today, Dr. Lu took out her medicine box and asked, "By the way, Master, where are we going?" "Go to Zhao Qiagong's mansion, their little lady seems to be sick, and the lady asked me to take a look." Dr. Lu put away the notes and asked, "What's the disease?" "I don't know, the palace maid who came to pass the decree didn't say it." When they arrived at the Zhao Qiagong's mansion, there was no need for the two of them to go forward. After Rong Si parked the carriage, he stepped forward and knocked on the door. The imperial physician Zhou was ordered to see the lady in the mansion. The concierge immediately understood, and while letting them go to the backyard to notify the owner, he removed the threshold to let them in. Rong Si waited for them to remove the threshold, then pulled the carriage in, put down the carriage bench and let them get off. Dr. Lu wanted to help Master get the medicine box. Man Bao glanced at what she had in the other hand. Seeing that she insisted, he simply gave her the medicine box. Soon a mama came to lead them to the backyard. Early in the morning, the young lady of Zhao Qiagong's mansion hadn't woken up yet. Mammy explained in a low voice, "Miss is not feeling well, I have been up late these days." Man Bao nodded to show her understanding. She also likes to sleep when she is not feeling well. Sleeping can regulate her body. The two waited in the side room for a while, and the first wife of Zhao Qiagong's mansion came to greet Man Bao, also worried about her daughter. The two sat in the side room for a while, and the maid came over to invite someone. Miss Zhao was half leaning on the bed, she was wearing a lingerie, her hair was simply pulled up, and when she saw her mother was coming, she sat up straight, and was about to get out of bed to salute when she was held down by Mrs. Shiza. Mrs. Shiza said with a distressed face, "You just lie down when you are not feeling well, and your mother is not someone else, why should you be more polite?" Miss Zhao responded with red eyes, looked up at Zhou Man and Lu Yunu, and lowered her head again. Man Bao carefully looked at her expression, and seeing that she seemed to be fine except in a bad mood, he said to Mrs. Shiza, "Madam, can I give Miss Zhao a pulse?" Mrs. Shiza quickly got up and gave in, and said to Man Bao, "Zhou Imperial Doctor, please, this child has been ill for several days, always saying that his chest hurts, I only have this one daughter, so I can't help but feel more distressed, and I also ask Zhou Imperial Doctor to carefully diagnose and treat." Treatment. Man Bao responded and first reached out to touch Miss Zhao's pulse, only to see that her pulse was a little dry, and she couldn't see anything outside of having breakfast this morning. "But in the early morning, I didn't eat anything, why is it so dry?" Man Bao asked, "Where do you hurt?" Miss Zhao lowered her head and said nothing, wishing to bury her head on her chest. The grandmother on the side immediately helped to speak, "It's the chest, the left chest hurts." Man Bao was startled, "Does it hurt or does it hurt?" "Inside the left chest is the heart." Miss Zhao still didn't speak, and the grandmother said, "It's a pain in the flesh. The slave and maid seem to have a sarcoid when she touches it, but it looks like a bud, but the lady is still young, so it shouldn't be." Miss Zhao lowered her head. Man Bao frowned, looked around at the dozen or so people standing in the room, and simply waved his hand, "You guys should step back first, just leave the madam and grandma." Mrs. Shiza was stunned for a moment, and then also saw her daughter's discomfort, and hurriedly asked the servants to retreat. Dr. Lu didn't leave, but stood on the other side of Zhou Man, so she looked good. Man Bao glanced at the grandmother, and then said to Miss Zhao, "Don't be afraid, tell me where it hurts, and I'll touch it." Miss Zhao's face was flushed, and she refused to speak. Man Bao said, "Look, you are a girl, and I am a girl. Haven't you taken a bath with your sisters? Don't be afraid." "No," Miss Zhao said in a small voice, I haven't showered with them." "That's not to be afraid of. You take off your clothes and I'll take a look and touch. There's no one else in this room, just your mother and grandma." Then Miss Zhao raised her head and glanced at her mother secretly, and then at her grandmother, and then slightly tore off some clothes for Zhou Man to see. "It's here, it hurts when I touch it, and it's pressed down by my clothes. It hurts too. See you tomorrow." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1699. She only ripped open the front of her clothes a little, exposing her neck. What can she see? Seeing that her hand pointed her to a place through the clothes, she simply started to pull off the blouse. Seeing that she was so frightened that she was about to cry, she touched and comforted her. "It's okay, we are all girls. Son." Yes, Imperial Physician Zhou is a young lady. If you feel your discomfort, my mother is here too." Man Bao quickly felt the lump, and she asked, "Is it here?" Miss Zhao hurt a bit from being pressed, and nodded with tears in her eyes, "Yes, It hurts. Man Bao asked, how long has it been? Miss Zhao whispered, it's been a few days. Man Bao smiled and asked, how many days are there? The grandma on the side immediately said, it's been 4 days. Man Bao touched the surroundings and asked her if it hurt, and asked, when did you first feel pain? Miss Zhao hesitated and refused to speak. After Man Bao asked a second time, she said, it's only 2 days after Chongyang has passed. When Mrs. Shizi heard this, her eyes darkened, it's been almost a month, why didn't you tell your mother? The grandmother was also startled. She didn't expect it to be so long, so she immediately knelt down. Miss Zhao wiped her tears and said, it wasn't very painful at first, but it was a little bit, and I didn't care. It was also 4 days ago that she felt that the clothes were sore, that they were worn down, and it hurt even more when pressed. She panicked. After all, she was only 7 years old. The little girl had been taking medicine for the past 2 days, and at one point she thought she was going to die. Madame Shiza was furious, and turned her head to drink angrily, how did you all serve, it took so long to know. The grandmother was trembling with fright, unable to say a word. The little girl was also frightened, and immediately burst into tears. When Man Bao saw it, he glanced at Mrs. Shizi in disapproval, and then comforted her, it's all right, it's not a big deal. What have you eaten? The little girl shivered from crying, and while shaking, she replied, I've taken the medicine. Before Man Bao could speak, Grandma immediately took the prescription out of her arms and offered it to her. This is not what Man Bao wanted to ask, but he still took the prescription, opened it and asked, I mean, what meals have you eaten, and are there any snacks or something? Where does the little girl remember this? But the grandmother, who was kneeling on the ground, whispered, Miss, because of the poor appetite for medicine, I ate a small bowl of silky chicken porridge yesterday morning, some sheep soup at noon, and a small bowl of noodles at night. Man Bao asked, what's in the mutton soup? It's nothing, it's all common things, such as ginger and angelica. Man Bao, what about that side? The noodles are boiled with the broth hanging in the kitchen. Because the lady has a bad appetite, she only put some green vegetables and beat an egg. Man Bao simply put his hand on Miss Zhao's pulse and asked about her diet before yesterday. Grandma told everything she remembered, and Miss Zhao on the side slowly stopped crying, and occasionally added a sentence or two, I also ate deer meat, which my father came back from hunting in autumn. I also ate kumquats. I heard that the tribute came from the south. Your Majesty rewarded my grandfather. I divided a small plate. Or dim sum made with longan at home is also delicious. Of course, the little girl did not only eat this kind of hot tonic, but also eat other foods, such as bird's nest porridge, pigeon porridge, and the like. Among the grandchildren of Zhao Qiagong's mansion, there are only 3 girls, and only Miss Zhao is a direct descendant. Her 2 cousins are both concubines, and she is not very old at this time, so she is loved by thousands of people at home. Zhao Qiagong got good things in the palace, and her 2 brothers have a share, so she must have a little more than her brothers. After listening to Man Bao, he reached out to touch the other side of her and asked, how about this side, does it hurt? Miss Zhao has gotten used to it now and feels much better, so she shook her head, it doesn't hurt. Man Bao withdrew his hand and said to the 2 big and 1 small, it's okay, it's just that the food is too nourishing, the blood is dry and hot, and it develops ahead of time. Madame Shizi asked, is this a good thing? Man Bao was speechless, so he couldn't help but look up at Mrs. Shizi, then shook his head, it's not a good thing, it's a bad thing. She pointed to the flower bed outside the window and said, the gardener disliked the slow growth of the planted flower, so he fertilized it hard, and stretched out his hand to pull it up. Do you think this is a good thing? Mrs. Shizi. Grandma. Miss Zhao, who was only ignorant and didn't understand anything, said innocently, it's not a good thing, the flower will die. Madame Shiza was startled, and immediately stretched out her hand to cover her daughter's mouth. Ba, pa, Tong Yanwuji, the wind blows away, what nonsense are you talking about? That flower in Zhou Man's metaphor is her. Miss Zhao looked at her mother with a bewildered look on her face, and Mrs. Shiza softened her heart and asked quickly, Tianyi Zhou, then, what should I do about this? It's okay, I gave her some medicine to cool her blood. Fortunately, I invited the doctor to see it. Otherwise, I'm afraid that it will not only develop prematurely, but also have a fever rash. Man Bao turned to the table to prepare a prescription. When the mother was still kneeling, she smiled, and said, please help me with a set of pen and ink. Dr. Lu, who was about to take the paper and pen and ink from the medicine box, gave her a hand and closed the medicine box again. The other three people in the room didn't notice it, and Mrs. Shiza looked at the grandmother and said solemnly, let's go soon. Grandma immediately got up, went to the small study and brought a set of pen, ink, paper, and inkstone. Dr. Lu stepped forward to pour water and grind ink, and Man Bao spread out the paper and said to them, don't eat hot food these days, including onions, ginger, and garlic, eat more green vegetables, and if you want to eat meat, eat less. Just eat some pork or chicken. Mrs. Shiza nodded again and again, and Man Bao continued, I'll prescribe the medicine for 4 days first, 2 doses a day, you don't need a large dose, the hard lump in her chest needs to slowly disappear, I'll give her a few injections later, for I will take a rest after the day, and I will come to see it again. Mrs. Shiza squeezed the handkerchief in her hand and asked, is it better to pierce the needle every day? Man Bao smiled and said, of course it's better. Acupuncture can help her get rid of blood stasis and reduce the fire, and it can also relieve the pain a little bit. It's much better. Can the imperial physician come to see him every day? Man Bao said, I must have an order from my mother when I leave the palace. Mrs. Shiza was disappointed, and asked the empress to speak, and her mother-in-law had to go. Man Bao paused for a while and then pointed to the Dr. Lu beside her and said, this is my apprentice, she and I have also learned a lot of time, the acupuncture that Miss Zhao needs to do is the most basic, Mrs. Shiza if I can trust her, I can ask her to come to the house every day for acupuncture. Man Bao and Lu Yunu looked at Shiza's wife with bright eyes. See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1700. Mrs. Shiza looked at Lu Yunu, hesitant in her heart, no matter how good the apprentice is, how can there be a master? But without the queen's will, Zhou Man obviously would not go out to see a doctor. While she was hesitating, Man Bao said softly, Lu Yunu has also been sitting in Ji Shitang for a while. She really studied acupuncture and moxibustion really well. I never lie. Madame Shiza smiled, but did not respond. Man Bao was a little disappointed, but he didn't force it. After writing the prescription, he handed it to Dr. Lu, and said casually, go to the prescription for drying and cooling blood, take a look. Dr. Lu was also very disappointed in her heart, but she still bowed to take the prescription and memorized it, and turned back to write down the case. After she had memorized the medicine, she handed it over to the grandmother. Man Bao said, put the needle after eating, let her get up to wash and eat first. She said to Miss Zhao, it's not a serious illness, don't worry, or you'll be in a bad mood, and the lumps will be bigger and more painful. You are still young, get up early every day and move around more after meals, eat more vegetables and less meat. Don't take supplements recently, it will go away in about 10 days. Madame Shiza asked, so long? It's still so fast after giving her an injection every 5 days, otherwise it will take half a month to heal. Man Bao reassured the mother and daughter, this is not an emergency, there is no need to prescribe heavy medicine, take it slow. That's it, she's young, balance is the best. Mrs. Shiza looked down at the prescription in her hand, and found that there were 4 herbs on it, and the only one was licorice. Obviously, there were very few medicines. Grandma didn't ask the girls outside to come in. She served Miss Zhao to get up and eat breakfast. Because Joe Man said that supplements were not needed, the pigeon porridge that was always hot in the kitchen could not be eaten. The servants considered it for a while, and finally just bring a bowl of porridge and a small plate of vegetables. Mrs. Shiza's face turned blue when she saw it. This is too simple, right? Let someone cook some more dishes. After thinking about it, Man Bao said, boil an egg, it's almost enough. Madame Shizi opened her mouth, but finally closed it. After breakfast, Man Bao was not in a hurry to get the needle, and sat on the chair with Miss Zhao to chat. Don't you have to go to school now? Miss Zhao said, I'm sick, and my grandmother and mother asked for leave for me and my husband. Man Bao said, it doesn't matter if you are sick, just get an injection and go to school later. Miss Zhao, she doesn't want to go. However, Man Bao had already anticipated it and said, you are in a bad mood, play more and divert your attention. You are not a serious illness, but you should pay attention to your food. Miss Zhao muttered, I'm in a bad mood going to school. Reading aloud will make you feel better. Miss Zhao disagreed, and the two stared at each other. Man Bao felt that she was a doctor and had to be considerate, so he said, okay, then what do you want to do? I want to play sandbags. Then play, you just can't stay in bed all the time. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, Man Bao took out the needle bag and said, come on, I'll give you a set of needles to remove blood stasis and reduce fire. Miss Zhao entered the inner room, not very shy anymore, and took off her clothes with the help of Grandma. While opening the needle bag, Man Bao asked Dr. Lu, if it were you, how would you pierce it? Dr. Lu immediately regained her spirits and answered. When she took off her coat and only had her underwear and trousers left, Miss Zhao turned around and saw the needle drawn by Man Bao. Her eyes widened and she was too scared to speak. Man Baijin nodded approvingly, and said to Dr. Lu, yes, let's do acupuncture like this. As soon as she turned her head to meet Miss Zhao's eyes, she cried with a wow. She turned around and hugged the grandmother's waist, crying, I don't want needles, I don't want needles. Madame Shiza was startled by the cry, and rushed forward, what's the matter, what's the matter? Mother, I don't want needles, I don't want needles, it hurts. Man Bao was stunned. She had read countless people and had given needles to many people, but this was the first time she had met someone who began to cry out of pain before the needle was pierced. Man Bao came back to his senses, quickly put the needle back into the needle bag, and went forward to comfort him, don't be afraid, the needle won't hurt. Miss Zhao didn't believe it. The needle looked so long, how could it not hurt? Miss Zhao tightened the clothes on her chest and did not give Joe Man a needle. Man Bao, who said she was going to tie her chest. Man Bao's gaze couldn't help but glance at her calf, where she would pierce first. However, her reaction was so intense that Man Bao obviously couldn't forcefully pierce the needle, not to mention that the needle might break when she was excited, and it would be bad for the needle to move out of place. Mrs. Shiza was also helpless, and wanted Joe Man to get an injection, so that her daughter's illness could be healed faster. She also felt bad for her daughter and was reluctant to get an injection. Seeing that Miss Zhao was about to roll on the bed, Man Bao thought about it and said, if you're afraid, then I'll stab you in your tiger's mouth first, and then I'll stab you if it doesn't hurt. Miss Zhao shook her head and hid her hands again. Dr. Lu couldn't help but stepped forward and said, Master, let me come. Man Bao glanced at her, then stepped back and let her come forward. Dr. Lu sat beside the bed and smiled at Miss Zhao, the needle really doesn't hurt. Look, this needle is so thin, how can it hurt when the acupuncture point is right? Dr. Lu pulled out a needle and let Miss Zhao watch it, then she stretched out her left hand and directly pierced the Haguaic appointment for her to see. For such a long needle, most of the needles were directly inserted into it. Not to mention Miss Zhao, even the Shiza's wife opened her mouth in surprise and couldn't help but take a step back, but she saw the smile on Lu Yuna's face. After pulling out most of the needle, and then plunging it in, she smiled and said, "Look, it doesn't hurt, right?" Miss Zhao swallowed a mouthful of boiling water. Dr. Lu pulled the needle from Hague's appointment and put it in the needle bag on the side, and then said to Miss Zhao, in our master's words, piercing the appointment is like a light sting from an ant. It still hurts. She stretched out her hand to hold up Miss Zhao's small hand, pressed her tiger's mouth with her thumb and said, "This is Hague point, acupuncture here can release the heat in the qi, elevate the clearness and lower the turbidity, disperse the wind and disperse the surface, and has the effect of ventilating the blood. Gong, do you want to give it a try?" Miss Zhao wanted to say not to try, but Mrs. Shiza immediately replied, "Try it, Aunt, you are sick, do you know that you need to be treated? Otherwise, it will still hurt in the future." Miss Zhao wanted to cry, so she looked at her mother with tears in her eyes, and wanted to hide in Grandma's arms. However, Mrs. Shiza became tough again. "Dr. Zhou, Dr. Lu, you can pierce it?" Miss Zhao is about to cry. Dr. Lu took out a needle and said to Miss Zhao, "Don't be afraid, I'll try it with a needle. If it really hurts, I won't stick it." Her comfort made Miss Zhao feel better, and Dr. Lu was also a little nervous, so instead of stabbing down as usual, she pinched her tiger's mouth with her thumb and kept looking for a position. See you at 9.